on new technologies or new styles. So if we took a look to see what was happening with ebooks in the consumer market and tried to overlay that on this chart. And this is a 5-year snapshot. Can you flip back one, Jason? Thanks. This is a 5-year chart, and those bars each represent a quarter, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, reporting from the industry about ebook sales, consumer sales to individuals. And you could sort of see that slow, gradual rise that sort of conforms to the bell-shaped curve. And then in the last year, in 2009, some really dramatic uptake in terms of ebook sales, even exceeding. And so we sort of pushed what we believe now into this early majority that ebooks now, from a consumer standpoint, are really have moved into the mainstream. And there's lots and lots of data and information to confirm that. I think Amazon reported last year that their ebook sales outstripped their print sales, print book sales. So this now is become something that we've been watching grow and watching take shape, and now seems to be moved into this mainstream for the reading population, the reading public. So now what that has to do with libraries, though, if we flip to the next slide, we can say, well, that's still been a slow train coming. We've been looking at ebooks and ebook products for a very long time. There have been some surprising successes out there with these big sort of historic collections of early English books online, 18th century collections online, where sales of those products and use of those products, once they went from microfilm to electronic versions, far exceeded the publisher or vendor expectations for sales, and ultimately had a real transformative effect on some areas of the humanities, where it's just much easier to bring users to those collections in an electronic form than it had ever been to bring them in a micro format or print format. So there have been some very good and positive experiences of libraries dealing with ebooks, but then there have also been these sort of hedging models that came out in the early 2000s, the net libraries and eBraries and Questias, that just the business models just didn't seem to mesh well with libraries. The user experience was rather poor, somewhere between poor and negative, lots of complaints about the platform, lots of difficulty driving users to those collections. So there was certainly a period of time where the market trying to form around electronic books for libraries was just a very difficult space. But lately we've seen some transitions. The history ebook product, ACLS, the American Council on Learned Societies project, has been very positive, again focused on the humanities and social sciences. And at this point, I think probably all of us would say the Springers and Wileys and Elsevier's, Cambridge to an extent, Oxford to an extent, have really seen a much more mature business model, much better licensing terms, much better access strategies for users. So we're really starting now on the library end to see widespread adoption of ebooks and much more uptake by users. And I guess I'll throw in here that the Google efforts to digitize retrospective holdings across our libraries also, has the potential of creating some real critical mass. Google has done some 15 million volumes by now that they've digitized from libraries and publishers. So a big mass of book material online that users can search, in many cases can't read if the material is in copyright online, although for those of you who've been tracking on the quote-unquote settlement between the lawsuit between publishers and Google, know that there are business models coming that would allow that material to be fully readable and accessible online. So to a very great extent, our library collections will be replicated in online environments. So much less of a only small slice of the book world is available to a point where most books can be accessed by most readers most of the time. So that will certainly change the dynamic further. Now, at the CIC, giving you a sense of the consortium perspective on that, we believe we've had some real luck working with our 12 universities, our 12 members, to sort of help drive their adoption of ebooks or move this along. Individually, every one of them had reasons why it was difficult for them to move forward, working institution by institution. But collectively, I think they felt like working together, they had some real clout in the marketplace that helped them negotiating book deals, ebook deals with publishers on issues of pricing, on issues of terms, gave them the opportunity to develop some real critical mass. So it was a mainstream way to represent those collections to users, that the users were likely to find things that they were looking for there. A much more rational experience, so it wasn't, oh yeah, chemistry books are online, but physics books haven't gone yet, or the social science selector doesn't believe in this, but the history selector is buying for their area. It's been a much more standardized message across our campuses when we were able to go out and aggressively acquire large bodies of this content. And I have to say, working collectively also gave people a chance to look at their peers, look at what other major institutions were doing, and find some courage from each other to make the sort of hard calls about reallocating funds and reallocating staff time to actually deploy these collections. So moving forward cooperatively was actually, I think, a help to our universities. The result, and Jason had flashed this here, we certainly track across the CIC on the use of our collections, the use of the ebook collections that we have now implemented. And I'll say at this time, we now have probably something like 17,000 Springer books available, probably closing in on 20,000 Springer ebooks available, dating from 2005 through the current year, 2010. Offerings for our users. We've also done pretty comprehensive deals with Elsevier and Wiley at this point, and while I'm not sharing their data because we just concluded those at the end of last calendar year, so this is the first year that we're actually looking at usage of those. I can tell you that those patterns seem to follow very much what I'm going to say about Springer. In 2008, when we first implemented the Springer offerings, and I think at that point there were something like 12,000 of them, we had something on the order of 755,000 chapter downloads across the CIC. And by across the CIC, I could give you a number that's something on the order of 400,000 users across our campuses collectively, graduate students, undergraduates, and faculty. So we had something like 755,000 chapter downloads. That was actually a big and staggering number for most of our collection officers to contemplate. And during that year, most of them were still struggling to get MARC records available, integrate the offerings into their catalog. So that was really a transition year for us in 2008, and yet the use seemed very high. If you flip forward to 2009, you can see that use almost doubled. At that point, most of our folks had worked out their record issues and platform issues, and saw an almost doubling once they were able to get out the message that these resources were available. So for our collection people, bibliographers, collection development officers, and others, even those who were skeptical about us sort of going this route and making this big buy of Springer ebook, been a very reinforcing message in terms of the use of these collections. I can give you a little further breakdown looking at the subject collections. If we flip forward here, we took a big deal approach to this and said, yeah, we'll just take everything. And of course, some selectors feel, well, yeah, but our people aren't going to use it, or we can pick the individual titles that are most likely to be used on our campuses. So we don't want to take everything because some of those things may not line up well with our curriculum. Well, what we found, and I think what most of our collection people would say at this point, is that once you make these resources available and you make them fully searchable, indeed people come to them, and they come to a very high percentage of the material, far more than we were buying in the print world. So we might have been buying about half of Springer's offerings every year across the CIC universities. And here you can see that once we were able to make everything available for the last 5 years, something on the order of 87% of those titles were used in 2009. And some of those areas like computer science and medicine and mathematics and statistics, biomed, many of those were over 90% of the titles actually had chapter downloads across our university. So a very positive story, not only in terms of accessing the same things that we used to buy in print, but also extending access to other material that users actually do find use for and are willing to come to. So I'm going to move on and talk a little less about use now and a little more about cost. Way back in 2000, and this is a study we'd love to see replicated at this point. A guy named Steve Lawrence, who is at University of Colorado, an economist, worked with ARL data and tried to understand the cost elements of buying a book in a library or buying a serial in a library. And what he found was, if you look at the very top line, that serials back in 2000, more expensive now. The cost per title was probably something on the order of $550. And then you would have to put on top of that various library costs to acquire that, to bind it, to store it, to preserve it. So looking, what's the total cost of that serial? Well, it may cost $550 to purchase, but it's over $700. So there's an increment to the cost of the serial item that comes about through the operational costs of managing a library. If you look at monographs, you see the proportions are very, very different. The actual cost of a monograph might be $50, but the operational cost of selecting the acquisitions unit that has to receive that item, the cataloging unit, the preservation and circulation unit that ultimately labels it, sells it, and manages it, that those costs for a monograph are something like 7 times the purchase price. So this was a really intriguing study in terms of managing library operational costs and the benefits of sort of these large-scale ebook purchases that were just coming onto the horizon in the early 2000s and now have matured considerably. So the message here is that purchasing or selecting individual items and trying to manage collections, at the scale that we're trying to manage in research libraries, are very expensive operationally for libraries, and the electronic platform for representing books and journals electronically and moving forward in more big deal strategies, much more cost effective for libraries in terms of managing their operational budgets. So let's go back to the poll that we started with and say that for libraries, yes, there are obstacles. Some of them